What if we're not as divided as we've been told? What if the anger feels real, but the reasons don't quite add up? What if the problem isn't disagreement, but that we stopped talking and started reacting? And what if emotion became easier to control than reason and division more profitable than unity? Today, we're not here to argue. We're here to ask better questions about manipulation, about narratives, and about why Americans stop talking to each other. Let's actually talk. Let's get unfiltered.
This is not noise. This is not outrage. This is conviction. We believe in faith. We believe in family. We believe in this country and the people who built it. Here, we challenge narratives, not individuals. We confront issues with truth, respect, and courage. These are serious conversations, rooted in principle, guided by tradition, and focused on the future. Welcome to What If Unfiltered. This is more than a show. This is a movement.
Conversations have all but ended. Questions are no longer just a question. They're received as attacks. Civility has been replaced with performative outrage. And in full transparency, I exude passion, intensity, and I have a really strong personality that has led me historically to be more aligned with the problem than the solution. See, I serve this country and I love this country, and a lot of what's going on sends rage through my body. Burning flags, other cultures trying to replace the American culture, canceling people due to disagreements, protecting foreign interests before protecting Americans. And just like some can't understand how anyone voted for Trump, I struggle to understand how anyone can vote for someone that left Americans to die in Benghazi, or let 13 Americans die in the Afghan withdrawal and then held no one accountable, or sends pallets full of cash, American taxpayer cash, in the middle of the night to Iran, or how anyone could ever get on board with circumventing the entire political primary process just to ignore the vote of the people and give yourself a better shot at winning the election. My problem with it is it's the people's vote, not the politicians' vote. And you don't get to ignore it for any fucking reason. The right to vote is sacred in this country. Hundreds of thousands of Americans have died to ensure that right is never surrendered. And the process was played with because the original guy who hid in his basement couldn't hide anymore, at least without all of America seeing that, unfortunately, he wasn't able to do the job anymore, if he ever was. I also struggle understanding how we give free housing, free money, free healthcare to illegal immigrants before American veterans, American homeless, or any American for that matter. And worse yet, give them fucking voting rights. What, just to win an election or add more seats in Congress? The sad point is we will spit, attack, cancel, burn, or even shoot an American, but we will throw money that we don't have and give rights that haven't been earned to someone who enters our country illegally. Please help me understand that. I truly hope that you can see where my confusion stems from, where my anger stems from. I'm not voting for the orange man's personality, or anyone's personality for that matter. I'm voting because the other candidates, in my opinion, did not provide the best path forward for my family and my country. That's it. Nothing more, nothing less. I'm not attacking anyone. I'm not defending anyone. I'm simply explaining my why. And That's where the conversation starts to break down because neither side thinks the other side is capable of making decisions that are based on values and logic or love of the country. Each side thinks the other side is too stupid, too lazy, too evil, too confused, or too deranged to make decisions based on logic and values. So I started this podcast in part to force me to be more aligned with being, at the very least, part of the solution. Try to get people talking, not yelling. Get people listening, not responding. Making decisions that are based on facts and not the false narratives the media is pushing upon us. I figured if someone with my intensity, passion, and personality can do it, then we all can. So this show is committed to asking courageous questions, just like we used to be able to do, and having respectful conversations like we need to get back to doing. Nothing that we're not capable of achieving if our goal is to be united. And this episode will attack this challenge from a completely different angle. Instead of preaching or lecturing, I'm going to attempt to explain why I don't understand what is happening to our country. I'm going to explain how I think we are right to be frustrated, but perhaps we're targeting the wrong audience with our frustration. I'm going to try to explain where my frustration comes from, not to sell you, not to convince you, and certainly not to judge you, but to open the dialogue and see if we can, at the very least, better understand where each other is coming from. And who knows, maybe we'll find that we have more in common than we originally both thought. But I think we need to accept the correct expectations. I don't expect everyone just to get it and change direction immediately. We have never Trumpers, always Trumpers. We have professional protesters who, if we're being honest, they don't have a job if they're not bitching about something. So, once again, at the very least, their credibility is questionable. If we use a football field analogy, what if together we attempt to reach the people between each 20-yard line? That gets us to about 60%, and then we continue to drip on those between the 15 and 20-yard line that may be open to hearing ideas, finding solutions, and making America first again. The bottom line is we must take the time to at least to try and understand each other. So this is my attempt to explain, to understand, and kickstart, hopefully, our recovery, because if we stay on the current path, we won't recognize America in the not too distant future. And I just can't sit by and allow that to happen without trying to save a country that I'm willing to die for. And besides, my children and now my grandchildren deserve better. So let's get unfiltered. I'm sure you've noticed how some conversations just don't happen anymore. And not because people don't have opinions, but because the second certain topics come up, everything tightens. Voices change, defenses go up. And suddenly it's not two people talking, it's two teams squaring off. Which I think is strange because most people I know, most people I've spoken to, they're not trying to fight. They're legitimately trying to understand. So let's take a different angle. Let's do something different. Let's talk about a conversation that needs to happen so we can get back to at least agreeing to disagree on certain topics and then find agreement where common grounds exist. And to present this in a non-attacking, non-accusatory manner, I'm going to create a scenario throughout the show and constantly go back to it so that we can introduce questions that I think need to be answered calmly, rationally, and honestly. So here we go. Picture two Americans sitting at a bar, nothing fancy, just stools, drinks, and maybe a little space so they can breathe. And one of them looks over and says, "Hey, man, can I ask you something without you thinking I'm coming at you?" And the other shrugs, "Yeah, that's kind of the point, right?" That scenario is this episode. So here's what I keep coming back to. I don't know where you are, but I feel like we're not just disagreeing anymore. It feels like we're living in two completely different realities in the same country. And not in some abstract, philosophical way, but in a practical, everyday way. Like when people say the economy is the strongest it's ever been, now, I'm not saying that's a lie. I'm not even saying there aren't numbers that you can point to. But a lot of people remember a time not that long ago when gas felt lower. Groceries didn't hit the checkbook as hard. Inflation wasn't chewing up every raise, and retirement counts felt steadier. And when they talk about that lived experience, they're told, "No, you're wrong. Everything is great. Gas prices are down, inflation is down, and 401ks are up." And that might be true. And in fact, it is true. But that's where something breaks in the conversation, because you don't persuade people by telling them that their own life didn't happen. And it's not just the economy. It's the logic behind how arguments get made. Take immigration for one. You'll hear someone say, one of those deported immigrants could have cured cancer. And that's an emotional appeal. But then those same voices will potentially say that potential life doesn't matter at all when it comes to abortion. And people aren't yelling about that. They're genuinely confused. They're asking, so does potential life matter or doesn't it? That's not hate. That's someone genuinely trying to understand the rules, the logic that's being applied. And the rules, man, they seem to change a lot. Take enforcement, especially now. ICE is all over the media everywhere. You hear about ICE violence. But let's be clear, accountability matters, and I'm not saying it doesn't. Every agency, hell, every individual should be held to the law. But what almost never gets talked about is how those situations actually start. A lot of those situations don't begin with ICE just charging in. They begin with people physically blocking enforcement operations, surrounding and threatening agents, threatening them and their families, interfering with lawful arrests, throwing objects and refusing to comply, coming to the protest with guns. That's not protest, that's obstruction. Let me ask you an honest question or three. What would you do if you were in their position? Have you ever thought about it? From their lens or experience, do their lives not matter? And in any law enforcement context, local, state, or federal, when officers are obstructed or attacked, situations escalate. And not because anybody wants them to, or at least not because the law enforcement officers want them to, but because control has to be restored. If people don't interfere, if people don't attack or obstruct, don't you think logically that most of these confrontations, they never happen? That's not ideology, that's cause and effect. And when the story only starts after things spiral, people feel like reality is being edited. You see the same thing with riots, property destroyed, cities burned, small businesses wiped out. And not just any property, city, or business, American property, American cities, and American businesses. Help me understand where this makes any sense. How does any of this make us better? Please help me understand why you get to decide what laws are followed and when. But we're told the response is mostly peaceful, while images of cars and property are burning in the backgrounds. How do you say that with a straight face? Then we say fake news, and we're crazy. We saw it with our own eyes, but enforce immigration law, and suddenly that's violence. People notice that inconsistency. They may not shout about it, but it stays with them. History gets treated the exact same way. You'll hear, you can't blame people today for what extremists did decades ago. That makes perfect sense. But then out of those same mouths, you'll hear, you're responsible for what your ancestors did 200 years ago. Same mouths, different standards. And people ask, so are we individuals or are we permanently guilty? Because you don't get to switch rules depending on who's being judged. Take war powers, another example. Obama authorizes a mission against bin Laden, and rightfully so. No talk of impeachment from either side, though. He engages militarily in Libya, debated, but no meltdowns. Biden authorizes legal strikes against terrorist leaders. Same thing. But when Trump authorizes a strike against a ruthless dictator, suddenly it's impeachable. And people ask, is the issue the action or the person? Because if the standard changes with their name or political party, man, it can't be about principle. Immigration enforcement shows this even more clearly. Under Obama, more than 3 million people were deported. Here, take a look at this clip yourself.
The bill before us will certainly do some good. It will authorize some badly needed funding for better fences and better security along our borders.
The fence is now basically complete. Maybe they'll need a moat. Maybe they want alligators in the moat.
Secure our borders with technology, personnel, physical barriers if necessary in some places.
We will not build a wall. Instead, we will build an economy where everyone who wants a good job can get one.
I voted for a fence. I voted, unlike most Democrats, and some of you won't like it, I voted for 700-mile fence. And let me tell you something, folks. People are driving across that border with tons, hear me, tons of everything from byproducts from methamphetamine to cocaine to heroin. It's all coming up through corrupt Mexico.
And the impulse is to hunker down, shut the gates, build walls, exit at this moment is precisely the wrong answer.
Former presidents have said to him that they wish that they had built a wall. Do you recall President Obama ever saying that?
Come on.
Construction of a 630-mile border fence create a significant barrier to illegal immigration on our southern land border.
All along, the president's saying, well, I'll do DACA and Dreamers in return for the wall. He's got it. President Trump, if you want to open the government, you must abandon the wall.
But there were no national hysteria, no constant protests. In fact, the media framed it as firm but humane. Trump enforces the same laws and suddenly it's fascism. Same law, different president, different narrative. Let's go back to our bar for a second. One of our guys sitting in the bar leans back and says, okay, so if the rules keep changing, why? And that's the real question, because here's the uncomfortable truth. a lot of what we're watching, it only works if we choose to let our emotions control us, if we react instead of thinking, if we rage instead of verifying, if we let headlines do all of our reasoning and research for us. Media companies aren't civic institutions, they're businesses. Their currency isn't truth, it's attention. What gets attention? Anger gets attention. Fear gets attention. Nuance doesn't. That's not a conspiracy. It's an incentive structure. And leadership in this country understands it. In fact, they've perfected it. A emotional population is easy to steer, more easier than a grounded one in data, facts, or truth. That's why on this show, truth is greater than narratives. Narratives are manifested by people with desired outcomes that benefits them. And if it doesn't benefit us, that's a problem. That's why questioning everything suddenly became controversial. Not questioning science, but questioning how science was used. Remember Follow the Science? That became a conversation ender. But science evolves, it updates, it corrects itself. When questions were shut down, people weren't watching science. They were watching authority. And then there was my body, my choice, a principle for years, rightfully so, until it wasn't. Same people, same voices, different headline. And people weren't angry, at least at first. They were confused. They found themselves asking, so is bodily autonomy a principle or just a slogan? And that question, I think in large part, still remains unanswered. But that confusion, it didn't make people anti-science. It made them distrust selective principles, which brings us back to the same issue again and again. When standards change with power, people stop believing the standard. And once that happens, the conversation shifts again. Let's go to the commercial. Hey everyone, I just wanted to take a minute and talk to you about something practical and intentional. Everything you see associated with What If Unfiltered, the colors, the designs, the phrases, none of it's random. This isn't merch for the sake of merch. This is identity. Our colors are inspired by our Marine Corps dress blue uniform. So understand this. You're not buying a shirt, a hat, or a hoodie. You're wearing a statement. A statement that says, faith still matters. Family still matters. This country is worth defending. It's not loud. It's not trendy. It's deliberate. We call it body armor because that's exactly what it is. Something you wear when you're willing to stand for something, even when it's uncomfortable. If you believe in the mission, see the merchandise at whatifunfiltered.com. And remember, shipping is always 100% free, and 5% of all clothing purchases will be donated to faith and veteran organizations because it's the American way. Let's get unfiltered. Okay, so back to our guys in the bar. The guy with the empty glass rolls it between his fingers for a second and then says, "You know what worries me the most?" The other guy leans in. "What?" "That we've stopped asking better questions." There's a pause because that lands. Think about it. Today we ask, which side are you on? Who are you voting for? What do you think about this headline? But we never ask, why is this framed the way it is? Who benefits from this outrage? And what happens if we just don't react? And that matters because the quality of society's answers never rises above the quality of its questions. One of the guys takes a sip and a few seconds later says, "It feels like we're being pushed to argue with each other instead of asking who's doing the pushing. And that's the part nobody wants to say out loud. And here's the uncomfortable truth. A lot of what's happening in this country today only works if we stay divided. If we're fighting each other over the symptoms instead of looking at the systems. Because when people are divided, they don't coordinate, they don't compare notes, they don't slow down, they just react. And reaction is easy to manage. You see it most clearly with selective law enforcement. That's where trust really starts to erode, because laws they're supposed to be boring. They're supposed to be predictable. They're supposed to be consistent. They're supposed to be applied evenly, but it's not how it feels anymore. Immigration law exists, but enforcing them is cruel. Riots destroy neighborhoods, but accountability is complicated. The police are attacked, but we shift the focus to why are the people angry? Federal agents are interfered with, but the interference is somehow excused, and people start asking, so when does the law matter? Because if laws only apply when they're politically convenient, are they even really laws? No, they're tools. Take ICE again. Most Americans understand something basic. If you don't interfere with an operation, if you don't block agents, if you don't surround vehicles, and if you don't throw things, the situation doesn't escalate. My friends, that's not politics. It's just reality. And yet the narrative almost always starts after resistance happens. The cause disappears, only the reaction remains. And when cause and effect is removed from the story, people stop trusting the story. And it's the same thing with riots. If a group destroys businesses, burns buildings, attacks officers, most people don't see justice. They see chaos.
The vast majority of the protests have been peaceful.
I just don't even know why there aren't uprisings all over the country, and maybe there will be.
There needs to be unrest in the streets for as long as there's unrest in our lives.
And you push back on them, and you tell them they're not welcome anymore.
We're in high school, I'd take you behind the gym and beat the hell out of them.
I think you need to go back and punch him in the face. Feel like punching him.
I want to tell you, Gorsuch, I want to tell you, Kavanaugh, you have released the whirlwind, and you will pay the price.
Show me where it says that protests are supposed to be polite.
And when that chaos is justified because it supports a cause, but condemned when it doesn't, the message becomes clear. It's not about the behavior, it's about alignment. And that's corrosive. And it goes beyond law enforcement. It reaches into culture itself. You can feel it. Norms we used to share, respect for institutions, shared history, basic definitions are all treated like obstacles now. History is something to cancel, not learn from. Culture, something that we're supposed to apologize for. Traditions are something to dismantle, and people start asking, what are we trying to replace this with? I sure hope it's not this. Take a look.
The Islamic tribunals, Sharia courts in Dallas, Texas, and as of last year, these tribunals decided around 300 cases.
That's not nostalgia talking. That's concern. Because every society runs on shared norms, both spoken and unspoken. When those disappear, trust disappears with them. So one of our guys at the bar shakes his head, and it says it feels like we're canceling ourselves. And man, that's exactly it. So the question should be, who's leading that? Who benefits when Americans are taught to hate their own past, to distrust their neighbors, and see their institutions as illegitimate? And the answer isn't a single villain, my friends. It's incentives. Media benefits from outrage. Anger keeps clicks. Fear keeps attention. Calm doesn't. Political power benefits from division. A divided population argues internally. A united one asks hard questions. Hard questions lead to accountability. Corporations benefit from compliance. They follow pressure, not principle. Activist organizations benefit from perpetual conflict. Resolution would make them irrelevant. Academia and cultural institutions, they benefit from gatekeeping language and norms. None of this requires secret meetings. It's just human behavior responding to incentives. And here's the part that makes most people uncomfortable. Dependency, it's profitable in this country. Strong families, they don't need as much help. Strong communities, they solve their problems locally. Strong individuals ask fewer favors. But fragmented, isolated, anxious people, they look upward. They put the tin cup out asking for freebies. That's not compassion, that's leverage, which brings the conversation to values. Because leadership always serves something. So I don't think it's extreme to ask, do our leaders actually share our values? And I'm not talking about what they say. I mean, who could believe anything that comes out of their mouths? I'm talking about what their outcomes show. Do their policies strengthen our families, our communities, our faith, our national cohesion? Or do those things keep getting weaker? Because values aren't proven by speeches. They're proven by who gets protected and who gets sacrificed. And this is where faith, family, and America first, they stop being slogans. They're stabilizers. Think about it. Faith anchors morality. Family stabilizes society. America first defines responsibility and drives accountability. Not hate, not exclusion, order. And if leadership consistently undermines those pillars, that's not neutral. It's misalignment. Back in our bar, one of the guys laughs and says, "You know what's wild? None of this feels radical." And it doesn't. And it doesn't because most of this used to be normal. America First wasn't controversial. You don't believe me? See for yourself.
And no nation which expects to be the leader of other nations can expect to stay behind in this race for space. Those who came before us made certain that this country rode the first waves of the Industrial Revolution, the first waves of modern invention, and the first wave of nuclear power. And this generation does not intend to founder in the backwash of the coming age of space. We mean to be a part of it. We mean to lead it.
Democrats ran on it. Republicans ran on it. Everyone understood it. Secure borders, controlled immigration, assimilation, domestic manufacturing, and strong defense. Then one orange guy says it differently, and suddenly it's extremism. That's not policy. It's about narrative, which brings the conversation back to Trump derangement syndrome. And this part needs to be said carefully. This isn't about liking or disliking Trump. Plenty of people don't like him. Personally, I'm not a fan of some of his rhetoric, his personality, and some of his presentation skills. But this is about what happens when one person becomes a lens for everything. If Trump opposed something, has to be embraced. If Trump supports something, it has to be rejected. That's not analysis. That's reflex. And reflex thinking spreads. It confuses people. It blurs standards. It makes anger feel like virtue. And over time, it creates real consequences. I mean, look at how confused the culture feels right now. Oh my God, we can't agree on what a man or a woman is. Well, some people don't know which bathroom to use, or their pronouns change depending on the room. There are people that identify as animals. Men compete in women's sports. Parents are afraid to ask questions. And kids are told biology is optional. And people aren't saying this out of hatred, as you might want us to believe. They're saying it out of disorientation. Biology didn't become more complicated. Politics became more controlling. And here's the part that most people don't want to admit. This confusion didn't come from conservatives changing their worldview. It came from standards being abandoned one by one in the name of not offending anyone. But when everything is flexible, nothing is grounded, and confused people are easier to control than confident ones. That's where anger comes in, because when logic disappears, emotion always fills the gap. You see it in how arguments are made now. Shouting replaces persuasion. Shaming replaces debate. Punishment replaces discussion. And it's hard to take that seriously. When people openly talk about violence, death, and celebrating destruction, or excuse law breaking because it advances the cause, they lose all moral authority. Anger doesn't prove righteousness, it proves instability. Remember when celebrities were calling for people to be denied medical care? Medical care. Because they didn't comply with vaccine mandates? Howard Stern wasn't fringe, he was mainstream. And people heard that and thought, that doesn't sound compassionate. That sounds authoritarian. When empathy becomes conditional on obedience, it stops being empathy. Which brings the conversation back to COVID. Not the virus, but the COVID logic. Follow the science. But science evolves. So when questions were shut down, debate was labeled as dangerous. And bodily autonomy, it disappeared overnight. People didn't lose trust in science. They lost trust in how it was being used as a weapon. My body, my choice was a principle until it wasn't. Same voices, different headline. That whiplash matters. That's when one of our guys at the bar says, maybe the problem isn't that people stop believing things. Maybe it's that they stop believing selective principles. And that's exactly it. When logic changes with the news cycle, people stop trusting the logic. And once trust erodes, everything gets harder. Simple disagreements become hostility. Questions become threats. Facts negotiable. And that's dangerous. Because here's the thing. You can argue policy all day long. You can debate tactics, timelines, percentages. But if you never ask what someone is actually trying to achieve, you end up arguing in circles. And that's where a lot of Americans feel stuck right now. So let's ask the harder question. Not what do you support, but what kind of America are you trying to build? Because outcomes, they tell you so much more than rhetoric ever will. One of our guys at the bar gestures with his glass. I don't even need people to agree with me on everything. The other nods and says, same. But I do need to know whether we're at least aiming at the same destination. And that's the key, isn't it? There are multiple ways to drive from Florida to California. And the way you get there depends on the goals of the trip. Getting there fastest is one way. Getting there seeing all the landmarks, it's another way. Taking the longest route is yet another way. But as long as you get there, mission accomplished. Because the ultimate goal was to get from Florida to California. And for a lot of Americans, the ultimate destination hasn't really changed much. They want a country where families can form and strive, a culture with shared norms and expectation, a government that serves Americans first, laws that apply consistently to all and in every court, a future their kids can actually build a life that's not radical. Shit, it's baseline. Which is why the question keeps coming up. Do our leaders actually want that for us? Or are they serving someone else? Now, that question makes people uncomfortable, and it should, because we shouldn't have to friggin' ask it, because it sounds accusatory. Maybe it is, maybe it's not, but it's necessary. Leadership is not just about what you do, it's about who you're accountable to. So it's fair to ask, are decisions being made primarily for American families, American workers, and American communities? Or do the outcomes consistently favor foreign governments, international institutions, corporate lobbyists, ideological movements, disconnected from everyday life because patterns matter? History has a way of repeating itself. One of the guys at the bar sighs. It feels like we're not even allowed to ask that anymore. And that's part of the problem. Questioning motives used to be normal. Now it's treated like extremism. But democracy doesn't survive without scrutiny. Here's a reality that people are starting to see clearly. Leadership responds to expectations. Always has. Because expectations are tied to accountability. If citizens expect theatrics and outrage and tribal warfare, that's what they'll deliver. But if they expect competence, accountability, and consistency, leadership adjusts. The decline didn't start because leaders forgot how to lead. It started when expectations and accountability evaporated. And expectations collapsed because people got tired. Tired of fighting. Tired of being confused. Tired of being told they're bad for asking obvious questions. People got tired of being canceled, so they disengaged. And disengagement creates a vacuum. And do you know what always fills a vacuum? Power. Power fills a vacuum. That's how we, the people, slowly turned into we, the political class. Not overnight, gradually, through deferral, through apathy, through emotional exhaustion. One of the guys at the bar shakes his head. It feels like they don't even talk to us anymore. What do you mean by that? They talk at us. That's exactly it. Politics have shifted from persuasion to management, from conversation to compliance, from leadership to messaging. And that's where America First comes back into picture. Not as a chant, as a corrective. America First doesn't mean America only. It means responsibility starts at home. It means you take care of your family before fixing the neighborhood. You stabilize the neighborhood before fixing the city. And you fix the city before saving the world. How is that selfishness? It's order. It makes sense. And for decades, this was common sense. Democrats said it. Republicans said it. Independents said it. Domestic manufacturing mattered. Domestic borders mattered. Assimilation mattered. Energy independence mattered. Then, globalism took over the narrative. And suddenly, prioritizing your own citizens became suspicious. One of the guys in the bar laughs quietly. Imagine telling a parent they're selfish for feeding their own kid first. And that's the absurdity. And yet, that's exactly how the argument gets framed. If we don't take care of everyone, we're selfish. If we put someone before us, we're selfish. America First is about sequence, not exclusion. But when sequence threatens power structures that benefit from globalization, outsourcing, and independency, America First gets demonized. And here's where the math starts creeping in. America Last isn't just a slogan. It's a balance sheet. When you subsidize foreign wars, fund foreign governments, outsource manufacturing, import cheap labor, suppress wages, increase dependency, someone pays. That someone is the American middle class. How fucking compassionate is that? If you're spending money, our fucking money overseas, you're not spending it here on Americans. And that should be a problem we can all agree needs to be fixed. You see it in housing. Young people can't buy homes. Wages don't match prices. Debt piles up. Why does this matter? Well, marriage gets delayed. Families don't form. Then leaders act shocked, as if this came out of nowhere. You see it in jobs. Visa programs undercut American workers. Corporations benefit. Young Americans compete against cheaper labor. Career stall. That's not opportunity. That's displacement. You can see it in energy. Dependency on foreign sources. Price volatility. Strategic vulnerability. And yet, we're told somehow independence is immoral. That logic just doesn't survive contact with reality. And through all of this, people are told this is progress. But progress for whom? And that's the question nobody ever answers, because there's no accountability. This brings the conversation back to selective enforcement again, because nothing erodes trust faster than rules that don't apply evenly. Immigration laws exist, but enforcing them, optional. Voting laws exist, but questioning them, dangerous. Protests are allowed, unless they challenge the narrative. Speech is free, but only in approved directions. But question the black community and you're racist. Question Israel, you're anti-Semitic. Question Islam, you're an Islamophobe. Question Somalia, you're uncompassionate. But white people, no laws protect us. Attacks, violence, hate speech, fire away without concern or accountability. That's not the rule of law. That's rule by discretion. And discretion always favors power. Then there's cancel culture. This deserves its own breath because cancel culture isn't just about speech. It's about rewriting our norms. History is framed as shame. Traditions framed as harm. Faith framed as intolerance. Patriotism is framed as extremism. And people ask, what replaces this? The answer is never clear, just removal. One of the guys at the bar frowns. You don't build something better by tearing everything down. Exactly. Reform requires continuity. Cancellation requires erasure. And erasure leads to a vacuum. And vacuums invite control. So who's driving this? Not your neighbor, not your coworker. Institutions, media, academia, corporate governance, political incentives, each reinforcing the same message. Your instincts are wrong. Your history is suspect. Your traditions are outdated. Trust us instead. Okay. And here's where faith becomes unavoidable. Because faith doesn't tell you what to believe. It gives you a moral framework. It says truth exists. People are flawed. Power should be restrained. Ends don't always justify means. When faith is removed, something fills the gap, which is usually anger and negative emotions. That's why so much of modern logic feels emotional. Arguments aren't built, they're felt. Outrage replaces reasoning. Shaming replaces persuasion. Punishment replaces debate. And when anger becomes virtue, literally anything can be justified. This is why it's hard for so many Americans to take the rhetoric seriously. When riots are excused and violence is minimized and police are attacked and agents are obstructed, but enforcing the law is now called tyranny. It's not justice, it's inversion. And it's why ICE keeps coming up, because ICE didn't change. The narrative did. Agents execute lawful orders. Operations are interfered with. Force escalates. Cause is removed. Reaction is highlighted, and people see it. One of the guys at our bar leans back. You know what scares me the most? And the other looks over. That enough people are starting to believe nothing is real anymore. Isn't that the danger? When reality becomes negotiable, people retreat into tribes. Tribes don't compromise, they clash, they fight. Which brings us back to asking better questions, because better questions slow things down. They restore agency, they force clarity. Instead of which side are you on, ask, what standard are we using? Instead of who's the villain, ask who benefits. Instead of what do I feel, ask what's actually true. That's not weakness, that's maturity. And that's where this conversation starts to turn, because both guys in the bar realize something. They don't need agreement on everything. They need shared reality. Let's take a quick break and we'll be right back. Hey everyone, it's Mike. I just wanted to have a heart-to-heart with you. This podcast, this movement, it only goes as far as you take us. I need you to stay involved. I need you to share it. I need you to let everyone know about it. Even if you didn't like it, share it with them anyways. They probably have better taste than you do anyways. At least that's what I'm hoping for. But in all seriousness, share it, follow us, engage with us. Send us an email at info@whatifunfiltered.com and tell us what we're doing right. Tell us what we're doing wrong. Challenge us, ask better questions, engage with us though, and maybe I'll wind up using that email in one of the episodes or on a short, but we need you and we can't do this without you. So engage, follow, share, subscribe. It costs less than 23 cents a day. And I really appreciate all of you being here. And why don't we do this together and take this thing to the next level and get our country back? All right. Thanks, everybody. We're back to our guys in the bar, and one finally says it. Maybe the biggest problem isn't that we disagree. Maybe it's that we don't even agree on how to disagree anymore. And that hits because disagreement used to be normal, expected, healthy even. People argued about taxes, wars, social issues, the role of government, and then they went home. They didn't assume their neighbor was evil. They didn't assume disagreement meant danger. They assumed it meant difference. But somewhere along the way, that broke. Disagreement stopped being something to work through and became something to eradicate. And once that happens, that's how conversations die. That's why the idea of agreeing to disagree matters more than people think. It's not surrender. It's not weakness. It's a recognition of reality. We are never going to agree on everything. And that's perfectly okay. Because there are real, serious disagreements in this country. Abortion, size of government, taxes, healthcare, regulation. Those debates aren't going away, and they shouldn't. We need to have those debates to find the best solutions. The danger isn't disagreement. The danger is when disagreement turns into dehumanization, selective law enforcement, emotional manipulation, and refusal to acknowledge facts. That's why everything keeps coming back to shared reality. You don't need shared ideology to have a functioning country. You need shared facts. You need agreed upon standards. You need consistency. But when facts become optional and narratives change with each headline, and logic bends to emotion, people lose their footing. They don't know what to trust. They don't know who to believe. They don't even trust themselves anymore. So they become silent and just fall in line. And that's not accidental. That's exactly what leaders in this country want. They want yes men, not why are we doing that men. A population that can't trust its own judgment will always look outward for direction. That's why emotional manipulation is so powerful. Fear tells you who to hate. Anger tells you who to punish. And outrage tells you when to stop thinking. And if someone can reliably trigger those emotions, They don't need to persuade you. They just need to activate you. That's why questioning everything matters now more than ever. And not in some paranoid way, but in a disciplined way. Question narratives, question motives, question incentives, question outcomes. Not because everything is false, but because enough things are framed dishonestly. That blind trust is no longer reasonable. And this is where responsibility comes back to the individual. No network gets to think for you. No politician gets to outsource your judgment. No influencer gets to vote for your family. Your vote is yours. It should represent your values, your family, your future, your community. Not CNN's, not Fox's, not MSNBC's, not your loudest coworker, not your angriest neighbor, and not a trending hashtag. And here's the thing. This isn't about rejecting information. It's about regaining agency. It's about saying, I'll listen, but I'll decide. I'll hear both sides. I'll slow down before reacting. That's not disengagement. That's citizenship. Which brings us back to leadership, because leadership doesn't rise above expectations. It actually sinks to meet them. If we choose to reward honesty, we get honesty. If we choose to reward division, we get division. And if we play stupid games, we win stupid prizes. Leaders respond to pressure. They always have. So demanding better leadership starts with demanding better from ourselves. Better questions, better standards, better restraint, better conversations, better data, better morals. And that includes being honest about values, faith, family, America. Those aren't political weapons, no matter what they want you to believe. They're stabilizers. Faith reminds us truth exists beyond their power, and their power can never be more powerful than Jesus Christ. Faith reminds us responsibility comes before entitlement. Our families need us to lead, to teach. They need us to be the influencer in their lives. America reminds us that citizenship means obligation, not just rights. And this is exactly why we, the people, for the people, and of the people, needs to return to being something a whole hell of a lot more than just a really cool tattoo. When faith, family, and citizenship weaken, everything else, everyone else, everything becomes easier to manipulate. And this isn't about forcing those values on anyone. It's about recognizing that a society without anchors drifts. And drifting societies, they just don't stay free for long. And that's why it's fair and necessary to keep asking our leaders, who do you serve? Do your decisions, your policy, your choices strengthen our families, our community, our faith, and our national cohesion? Or do they consistently erode them? That question isn't divisive, but avoiding it is. One of our guys at the bar looks around and says, you ever notice how most people actually want the same basic things? Yeah. Safety, opportunity, stability. Exactly. Most people want to work, raise their kids, live in peace, feel proud of where they live. That's not left or right. That's American. And maybe Maybe that's the real tragedy here. We've let ourselves be convinced that our neighbors are the problem, when the real problem this entire time has been manipulation by systems and people that benefit when we're divided, confused, and emotionally exhausted. So maybe the enemy isn't a person. Maybe it's selective truth, shifting standards, emotional control, false narratives, and the quiet erosion of accountability. And maybe seeing that clearly is the first step to something better. The conversation at the bar slows. The drinks are almost empty. And one of the guys says the thing that feels like the end of the night. You know, I don't think we fix this by winning arguments. I think we fix it by remembering how to talk. That's what this episode was all about. Not convincing, not conquering, not shaming, just talking, asking harder questions, sitting with uncomfortable answers, and refusing to let emotion replace reason. Because what if the way forward isn't about choosing sides, but choosing standards? What if the most radical thing Americans could do right now is slow down and think for themselves? And what if we, the people, still mean something? If we're willing to act like it actually does. Same bar, same stools, same country. This conversation doesn't end here. Maybe it just finally starts to get going, to get us reunited again. Take care, everyone. Thanks for joining us, and let's get unfiltered.
These conversations don't end when the episode does. They carry forward into how we think, how we speak, and how we engage the world around us. Here, we don't demand agreement. We ask for honesty. We don't chase outrage. We pursue clarity. Because better questions shape better conversations, and better conversations shape better outcomes for our families, our communities, and our country. If this episode sharpened your thinking, share it, continue the conversation, and let's get unfiltered. Until next time, this is What If Unfiltered, where conviction is rooted in faith, guided by tradition, and focused on the future.